We will have the conversations that few are prepared to have, and more importantly, conversations centered on rationality. Subscribe now to listen to Rational Voices with Sunil. Fatima, thank you for joining today. It'll be great to start with what's going on in Ireland right now.
Well, what isn't going on? There's a lot going on. We have a crippling housing and accommodation shortage. We have, on top of that, we have the government still inviting in basically limitless numbers of people from overseas, who they plan to accommodate in, I don't know, like migrant mega centers, basically, that they haven't built yet. We have about 1 million people on hospital waiting lists, and we have a teacher shortage. Like, we have all this kind of stuff going on that makes you question how we're functioning as a first world country, if that is indeed what we are.
It seems very similar to issues on what's going on in the UK and England specifically. It seems very similar in terms of what's going on here. What are some of the things, like the biggest concerns you hear from people in Ireland?
Well, I suppose the one issue that probably crosses the political divide in Ireland is probably housing, because, come on, that's something everyone needs. It doesn't matter if you're left wing, right wing, or anywhere in between, like, you need somewhere to call home. And increasingly, people are having difficulty finding that. So I think that that is something that is, it's huge. It's everywhere. I think the last official numbers I saw, I think they were from 2003. There was about 56,000 people on local authority housing lists. Like, that's obviously social housing. And I can't see that has gotten any better since then. We have about 15,000 people in homeless emergency accommodation, and there are tens of thousands of other people who are often referred to as invisible homeless. That's people who are maybe sleeping in their mum's box room, even people sleeping in cars and vans and that kind of thing, people sleeping on their friends' sofas, and nothing really tangible has been done to try and fix that.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. What's the current Irish government doing to combat that? Because it seems like your migration is still going up and up and up. So it seems like it's only going to get worse. But what are they doing right now to try and combat some of this stuff?
Well, they just apologized for overstating the number of houses they promised to build and said they would build last year. So, they're falling short on what they are doing. To answer your question, is that they're promising to build more houses. Which is, it's kind of funny because if you talk to anyone in Ireland, there seems to be quite a chronic shortage of tradesmen. It's pretty hard to get a plumber, pretty hard to get someone to pave your drive. So I'm not really sure where these builders who are going to build these tens of thousands of houses per annum are currently. Yeah, so that's what they're saying they're doing.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems, yeah, concerning, and some of the stuff that I was reading, something, for listeners who don't know, you're obviously a journalist, and I was reading one of your stuff in terms of what's going on with the gender stuff in Ireland. Obviously, Trump's done some massive things in America, and it looks like some of that's now being reflected in Ireland. Is that correct?
Well, as far as I know, our own HSE, they haven't done what's been done in the UK. Like, obviously over there you've banned prescription putting kids on puberty blockers. Like, that's obviously off the table now in the UK, and some other countries as well. But no, they haven't kind of done that as yet. There are calls from within the medical profession to stop this, affirmation approach. I mean, it was, what was the exact number? It was like 250 or something Irish children were referred to the now shut down and totally disgraced Tavistock Clinic in the UK. I believe the youngest one was about 5 years old.
Wow.
So if a 5-year-old tells you they think they're born in the wrong body, do you just tell them, no, you're not, love, or do you refer them to a clinic overseas? I mean,
Reason.
so yeah, I mean, we haven't taken the radical steps that have been taken by the NHS, I suppose. So we continue to be kind of behind everyone else, in not only in that respect.
I mean, we'll definitely talk about some of the gender stuff, but is that a general feeling of Ireland just being kind of behind everyone else at the moment as a country, as an economy? Does it just feel like you're just behind at the moment?
I suppose if you look at how Ireland has changed over the last few decades, I mean, we still have, maybe it's crumbling at the moment, but I suppose outsiders would think, oh, that's a kind of a conservative Catholic country. And yes, up until a couple of decades ago, several decades ago, that was the case, at least ostensibly. But, ever since the kind of the authority of the Catholic Church has waned, um, we kind of jumped from strict Catholicism to like radical LGBTQ. There was not very much in between. So a lot of what, critics of the Catholic Church would call the stranglehold of the church has been replaced in many ways by the stranglehold of LGBTQ ideology. Where there's literally pride flags made into the windows and some of the doors in our Parliament building
Wow.
as seemingly permanent, semi-permanent structures. It's not something that's isolated to Pride Month only. So, you have to, I don't know. I think we've made big somersaults and leaps into territories that are probably quite unknown and not something that, maybe our diaspora in America would associate with Ireland. Like they think we're all lovely little leprechauns, um, dancing around and having drinks and, having a laugh, but it hasn't really been like that for quite some time. Um, I think one of the most noticeable things that would have changed is, and I lost my track of thought. What was, yeah, what you're saying, your
The
Ireland,
change from
the,
Catholic Church now
hmm.
to LGBTQ being pushed.
Yeah, and so, it's a strange kind of a juxtaposition. It's like you're taking, like a minority group, like obviously gay people they're a minority group, and then you're basically almost making everything about that. And it's like my boss once said, well, there are way more Polish people in Ireland than there are LGBTQ. Why don't we have like a Polish month? You know,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a strange, like it's a bit of a strange thing. It's almost I would refer to it personally as a new religion.
Yeah,
Um,
it sounds like a lot of this exactly what it is. It seems like you've replaced the Catholic Church with this new religion, the LGBT. It seems very similar from what you're saying, especially in Ireland.
Well, certainly when there's dogma attached to it, like, maybe not the LGB, but when you bring in the T, then you have to believe that people can be born in the wrong body, that you can gender and biological sex are not connected. There's all these like very, very unscientific things that you must believe in order to adhere to that ideology. So for that reason alone, to me, it does kind of seem like a bit of a religion.
And I think what's scary about this particular kind of religion, unlike other all other religions, there is forgiveness, and it seems with these groups, there's no forgiveness. You're cancelled, you're pushed really, and it can be quite vicious. I think if you're on the other side, what's the pushback been to these groups, if any, in Ireland? Are there people, whether it's people in political parties or just movements, are there people countering this stuff?
I think for a long time, the government and also the opposition party were very much in lockstep. Like they were all, quite behind the idea of putting kids on puberty blockers and like, the affirmation approach. In 2015, we introduced this thing, and some politicians who signed off and have since admitted that they didn't even read it, called the Gender Recognition Act. So from 2015, I can walk into a government building and sign a document saying that I'm a man, and I'll walk out and I'll be legally as much of a man as you are. Or vice versa. You could, be a woman if you wished, and that obviously gives you access to women's spaces, women's sports, everything.
That is absolutely absurd. And is that still the case now? Could that still?
Yes.
Wow. So in Ireland, you can still do this. Absolutely crazy. So, again, it just seems really interesting. No, there's no kind of pushback. Like, are there not people like campaigning against it, or people not speaking out against? Is there a fear if you do speak against it, or
There are people, like there's one group in particular called the Countess, and I know that, they have some people who are trying to bring forth an amendment to the legislation, very much like what happened in the UK with the Isle of Bryson case.
right?
So, for anyone who doesn't know, Ireland, it's carte blanche. You know, if you're a violent male sex offender and you get your gender recognition certificate, you can be housed in female prisons. And there is currently a very violent man called Barbie Kardashian who he's sentenced to 5 years. He was planning, in his own words, to torture, rape, and kill his mother. He also violently assaulted female social worker, one, I should say. And, because of his, alleged very, very bad behavior, he was at one point taken back to the male wing of the prison. But he has the right under Irish law now to be in the female prison. So what that particular group, the Countess, wants to do is to, I suppose, follow what the UK did, where now I believe it's that if somebody is convicted of sex crimes against women, they cannot be housed in a female estate. I think that they want to start with that at least. So there is that level of pushback.
It just seems crazy that's even a thing that's going on. I remember LA did something similar a long time ago where they put men who identify as women into female prisons, and then they realized very quickly that women in these prisons were getting pregnant, they were getting violently assaulted, and then they kind of realized this was a pretty stupid idea to do this in the first place. But it seems absolutely crazy that Ireland's doing this, and what's even more crazy, it doesn't get that much attention in the UK. I don't think many of our listeners would have any idea that that's still the case now. So as of now, you can identify as a woman and be put into a female only prison.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah, and even it's something that it's kind of a luxury belief, isn't it? That like, if you put on a skirt and sign a piece of paper, you can be a woman if you're a man. And I think the kind of women, in my opinion, that often kind of support this kind of stuff are the ones that are not affected by it. Like the legislators, like how likely are they or somebody they love to be in a female prison? It's very unlikely. Or there's even a case of a man who goes by Sean Kavanagh. And my colleague at Gript, Paddy O'Gorman, he's a veteran journalist. He's done quite a lot of work, especially interviewing the kind of women that do rely on homeless accommodation. And this man, Shauna Kavanagh, was housed in Rathmines in a homeless hostel with women, many of whom have addiction problems or, trying to get their lives back together. And he closed fist punched one of them in the face several times, threw her down the corridor. And he was then put into the female wing of Mountjoy Prison for viciously assaulting a woman, I believe, who was in her 60s. And he's a big man. He's not some, delicate little thing. Shauna is quite hefty. So that's kind of,
Absolutely crazy that this is still happening in Ireland. Is there any kind of, do you see this changing anytime soon? In the UK, I think we're seeing a lot of what Trump's done, and there's, I think, reasonably good coverage. I saw a poll recently that although people were in the UK, it was quite split in terms of whether they liked Trump or not, but their policies, he came out as overwhelmingly they liked his policies. Is there any kind of that movement in Ireland where the people are starting to see maybe Trump or other figures and think, oh, this kind of needs to happen here?
I think that with the transgenderism thing in particular, that, the government was so captured for it for such a long time that it's probably quite embarrassing for them now to be like, ah, here, lads, we were wrong.
Right.
Because, when you think about, these policies of, like sending kids to Tavistock, where we now know that many of the patients there would have been not really questioned about why they think they're in the wrong body and just essentially signed off on life-altering drugs. It's really hard, I imagine, if you are somebody who's gone all in supporting that, to say actually we were wrong, because then it's like, okay, well look at what's happened to the people who you encouraged to do this, who you said that this was a good idea too. So I mean, I guess that, inevitably, as we're usually the slow kid in the class when it comes to these kind of things, we probably will get around to it eventually. Really, come on, I really don't think that the vast majority of Irish people believe that you can be born in the wrong body, or a man can become a woman by taking cross-sex hormones or having bits of their body cut off. I really don't believe that the vast majority of people believe that. So eventually it probably has to die.
How has this happened? How has Ireland gone from like you say what people in America will think, and I think people in some of the UK will think, a more traditional religious Catholic country. How has this just happened where we've just gone so far on the other side? It seems like overnight. I'm sure it wasn't quite like that, but why is it? How, and why is that happening in your opinion?
I think that, it's probably not just a malaise that's particular to Ireland, but I do think that, the human heart has like what some people might refer to as like a God-shaped hole in it where you will worship something, like you will have something that's a kind of, a god to you, whether that's, fitness if you're like one of those gym bunnies, whether it's LGBTQ if you don't have a personality, like, or whether it's God or whether it's shopping, like you will have something that's kind of the cornerstone for you. And I suppose that since, the pop culture and the government adopted the LGBTQ stuff, that's kind of just what became what it is.
Right. And when you're speaking to fellow Irish people and people that, what's the overwhelming feeling? Are you seeing like a shift where people are saying, yeah, it's good that we're pro-LGBT, or are you seeing more people on the other side saying, I can't believe this has happened, and are they almost scared to speak out? Because that's a big thing in England where I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. I just can't understand. I don't have children, but if I had a child and they were being taught that there's 97 genders or whatever that they get taught now in the UK, there's no way I think I'd be able to just stay silent, or and just allow that. But I just find it very hard to understand in the UK why so many parents do. They just say absolutely nothing when I'm convinced deep down they believe that there's only two genders. What in Ireland? What's like the when you speak to people? Is it the same? Like, do you think most people are agreeing with probably the pair of us and that there are two genders and they just don't want it? They're afraid to speak out.
I think that that's the case. But I think one of the things that I don't know if gave people courage is the right word, but there was a proposed change to our junior cycle sex education. Is called SPHE, Social and Personal Health Education, I think is the acronym. But basically, the books that were proposed for the new curriculum were teaching gender ideology in an uncritical way as a fact. So it wasn't, some people believe that there are more than two genders. It was like, there are more than two genders. What is your gender? And, teaching, there was some really, really horrific material in there for quite young kids, junior cycle, like they were teaching them like what fisting was. Um, there are probably adults out there that don't know what that is, but I don't really know why you need to teach that to a 12 to 15-year-old. Like how to be an ally. Like, there was one book that had something about a girl who was like, I hate my stupid breasts, and like just, this really, really unhealthy kind of unquestioned transgender ideology stuff that they were just they were planning to throw at kids. And I think the National Curriculum Agency got something like 4,000 submissions. The Department of Education got hundreds of emails of parents being like, sorry, I don't want my child taught this. And one of the insidious things about that was that it wasn't just in the SPHE as far as I'm aware. I also was told that it was kind of in like sociology as well. It was, this gender ideology had almost kind of crept into other areas of the curriculum where the only way you could possibly have your kid avoided is to pull them out of school altogether. So, there really seems to have been, a plan to just, we're going gung ho with this gender ideology stuff. Like it's a fact in Ireland, like there's 73 genders and that's it.
What's the church saying to this? Well, historically, the church had reasonable power in Ireland. What are the church doing in response to this?
I mean, like honestly, not a whole lot. Like there was a priest, I think he's retired now. He's down in Kerry, Father Sean Sheehy. He during his homily, he said something like really shocking for like Catholic priest to say that that there's only two genders and God made Adam and Eve, man and woman. Like all this shocking rhetoric that no Sunday mass goer would ever expect to hear from the mouth of a Catholic priest. So he said that I think it's about 2 years ago now. somebody, I think, filmed him, or it was live streamed. I think a lot of masses have been live streamed since COVID. And the entire country went into meltdown. Like there were people on, we have a very famous radio show called The Joe Duffy Show. There were people on there in absolute full on meltdown. How dare he? How could he say this? There were even people who were present at the mass who walked out on him. Um, so yeah, I mean, you know, it's almost like if somebody from the church does try to speak out, and again, like it depends on what church you go to, I suspect. But I feel as though the abuse scandals, which were horrific, I think that the Catholic Church, even priests who have absolutely nothing got to do with that, have done nothing wrong, they feel as though they have been neutered in a way. Like they can't really say, "Hey, this is wrong," because there'll be 100 people being like, "Didn't you abuse all the kids?" Like that kind of way. So I think they feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I think that's probably the case for even like a lot of what's going on in England. We're constantly talking about like white privilege and all this sort of stuff. So I think a lot of people are maybe scared to speak out because if they do, then people will wrongly say these sort of terms towards them. What's Ireland's demographic like? I know it's probably a silly question, but like the UK's demographic is changing rapidly with mass migration. And it's changing astonishingly quick. Is Ireland doing a similar? Is Ireland going for a similar process where mass migration is uncontrolled and it's very high?
Certainly, I think the current rates, as per the last census, is that there are 22% foreign born, like in the population right now. So what you've got,
Okay.
yeah, that's about kind of where we are. And you have to remember that that's only the people that answered the census. Like there's probably thousands who also didn't. We've definitely got undocumented. It's like our former Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, she gave an amnesty to, I think it was like 17,000 illegal immigrants. So, and then, yeah, the borders are very porous. I think it was last year alone, 70,000 people claimed asylum, and the asylum figures this year so far, I think, have been even higher than the previous year, which was unprecedented. So, there's no sign of it slowing down that I can see.
What does that mean for Ireland as a country? So for the UK, I think in particular we've been in Southport, the following riots, and then that's really been like a melting pot where there's been a lot of anger in the UK for quite some time about this, and we really saw it in the summertime. And although obviously there were some people who maybe took it too far, but the general sentiment is that we have uncontrolled mass migration. We're not happy about it as a country. We're not happy with what the Tories did now. We're not happy with what Labour making it even worse. There's a genuine, you can feel a sentiment in England that this is not going to carry on. We don't want it to carry on. What's the Irish sentiment like towards the mass migration?
Well, in recent polls, like we have this thing called Red C, it's quite a robust polling agency. They found that 75 or 76% of people, that was a good year ago now at least, thought that the government had taken in too many refugees and asylum seekers. So we have over 100,000 Ukrainians who are given it's called beneficiary of temporary protection. So those protections, I believe, are set to expire in March of this year. Now, I haven't heard if that's going to be extended or what the plan is. But yeah, so most of the people surveyed said, that there are too many. And the demographic, like in Dublin in particular, I think, well, this is kind of the area where I'm from. I'm kind of from the greater Dublin area. You know, in some parts of Dublin, it's very, very obvious that the clear majority of people on the streets are not Irish. Um, and I think that's a sad thing.
Yep.
Like, I've traveled the world. I love going to Japan because everyone's Japanese and everyone is speaking Japanese and it's such a unique experience. So, when people come to Ireland, they probably want to meet Irish people and, you might have some difficulty doing that these days.
I think that is deeply worrying. I think it's similar for London, to be honest, because London is becoming the exact same, where um, parts are just unrecognizable from what people would have seen 10, 20 years ago in London. So it seems like that's happening. What about the rest of Ireland? So again, in the UK, there's a massive, it almost feels like a massive divide between London. and the rest of the country, and or you could maybe add Birmingham, Manchester. There's a real big difference between big cities and the rest of the UK, and the gap seems to be widening and widening in terms of what people's priorities are. Is that similar in Ireland? Are the people of Dublin, are they just have different priorities, different views than the rest of Ireland?
I think that certainly there's a famous constituency in Ireland called Dunleary Rathdown. And that is, I think it's the most affluent constituency, if not the most affluent, and certainly one of the most. And during our recent referenda, which were resoundingly rejected, they wanted to remove the word woman from the sorry, the word mother from the constitution in order to broaden the definition of the family. That was one thing. And like this place, Dunleera Rathdown, was about the only place in the country that voted yes on, I think it was that, or it could have been the other question. But it just goes to show that like a lot of the kind of political class and the media class would come from, that greater area. So the kind of people who are telling you what to think and also making the decisions in this country in a large way, I feel, do not really represent the feelings or the hopes or the dreams of the majority of Irish people. So yeah, there is certainly a kind of a disconnect there.
So like a divide between, if you like, the ordinary working class of Ireland, and then the people in, if you like, the positions of power who are just out of touch, essentially.
Yeah, and then we also have an issue which I think it was demonstrated this week as well, where somebody who was a journalist is now, she was a sports journalist, I believe. She's now being asked to be a senator, like a Fine Gael senator.
Okay.
So there's that overlap, like journalists becoming political advisors, just, are people who are in politics wanting to get nice jobs in the EU, so they have to be as lefty as possible in order to have a nice CV to get over there and get on the gravy train. Like that kind of thing goes on quite a lot.
Okay. And obviously you work for Gript, and that's very different from the other media outlets. What are some of the stuff that Gript is covering that, if you like, the lefty media outlets, and where does Gript sit on the media spectrum in Ireland?
I think, and I say this with regret because I think that, we need to have a very balanced media in order to inform the public and, let the Irish people make informed choices about what they want for the future of the country. I think we are the only mainstream, if I can use that word, we're the only mainstream, like kind of center right leaning media agency. All the others, without exception, they're left. I mean, and we had recently a survey done by a college in Ireland called DCU, and it basically measured the political opinions of journalists, and the vast majority, I think it was like in the 80s or something, they self-identify as left wing.
Wow.
So, there's this lovely, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say myth, but there's this lovely idea about independent journalism. And like, yes, that's the ideal. But at the same time, like journalists are people,
Mm.
and I suppose some probably find it harder than others to kind of separate, their own, what they believe to be true from objectivity. But yeah, no, for example, one of maybe the biggest things, we do not use pronouns. We have not, we will not use pronouns. And a lot of the other ones, we had news headlines in RTE, which is our national broadcaster, as well as News Talk, which is another big one, when Donald Trump signed the executive order to ban biological males from female sports. Their headlines were Donald Trump bans transgender women and girls from female sports. Donald Trump bans transgender women and girls. It wasn't like, no, Donald Trump bans biological males. Because that's what he did. He
Yep.
didn't ban any kind of woman, he banned males.
Yep.
So that's the kind of ideological capture. Like they do that. Like they say she, her for a person that's a man.
Right.
They'll describe the guy I mentioned a few minutes ago, Barbie Kardashian, as a troubled girl. He's not a girl. He's a guy that, who is very not well, very dangerous, a very dangerous individual. And yes, they are more concerned about, you know, step like keeping in step with this political ideology. And I'm there thinking, but you're a journalist, you shouldn't be participating in any political ideology. It just seems to be, such a contradiction in terms, and yet here we are.
It seems so similar to the UK. I think it's parallels. I think there's few maybe GB News, Talk TV. Aside from that, I don't think there's really anything else. You see, BBC did very similar stuff with the way they reported on Trump, with the exact same sort of headlines for when he banned biological men competing in female sports and stuff like this. So it seems very similar. At Gript, is it tough, like speaking about these issues, like objectively and saying this stuff? Because I'm guessing you probably get quite a lot of pushback from the other media outlets, and I'm guessing slurs and whatever. Is it tough being the only non-left, if you like, media outlet in Ireland?
Well, I suppose it's financially tough because we don't get any of the grants or anything that the others sometimes get. It's actually very funny because we're often dismissed and maligned as vile racists, but in actuality, we are the most ethnically diverse media outlet in Ireland. Because, my dad was from Pakistan, my mom is Irish, my colleague Ben Scallon, his mom is from Jamaica, his dad is Irish, our camera guy is from India. We have other people, like there's a guy from Ukraine that helps me sometimes. Like we are actually really ethnically diverse. And yet, because, we say the wrong things, we don't toe the political line, we are racists, and we're everything that's horrible, and we're big horrible monsters with fangs, and we're far right and all this kind of absolute rubbish just because we say something that sounds different from what everyone else says. So yeah, but look, I mean, we're doing a public service, the Irish people have a right to know what's going on in their country. Um, is it tough personally? Yeah, probably. I mean, come on. You kind of, I suppose you pigeonhole yourself in a way, but it is what it is. Like I became a journalist because I want to tell the truth. I didn't become a journalist because I want to be a PR agent. That's my stance.
It does seem like a lot of the journalists in the UK, and it seems like Ireland, are PR agents for either the government or the EU in particular, and for us, and it seems like that. What is the relationship with Ireland and UK? So how do Irish people see what's going on in the UK? What's the general feeling like towards the UK?
Think it's hard to answer because I'm in such a media bubble. Like everybody around me, like I have friends who are journalists in the UK, so I suppose I know what's going on, but your average Irish person, like, probably not that bothered, to be honest. I think one of the things where UK politics came very much into frame was when, your former PM, Rishi Sunak, signed off on the Rwanda deal to send asylum seekers off to Rwanda to be processed. And around that time, it was figures from the Department of Justice basically said that 80% ish, like 80, it might have been 81 or 88 or more, of the people coming into Ireland claiming asylum were actually coming from the UK.
Right.
So that was when it was like, oh, this policy shift in the UK is actually affecting us now. That was when I think UK politics came very much to the fore. But one thing I find quite fascinating is, Northern Ireland, right? Like, obviously, if you're a Republican, it's part of Ireland. If you're a Unionist, it's not. Well, I'm not going to make any further comment on that. But it's at the top of our country. And, there's such a lack of awareness, I feel, about what goes on up there. And also, like, nobody really gives a damn.
Yeah.
Like, we act like it's the moon or something. It's not, it's mad.
Crazy. So, is there no connection between the two countries now? Like, is it just literally completely just separate, like England or Wales or Scotland, same sort of thing?
Yeah, like, in terms of the jurisdiction, yes. And then obviously they have the NHS, and like, there's not a whole lot of overlap. Like you don't really hear that much about it. Like I actually used to live in South Korea as well, and then people from South Korea like don't really give a crap about North Korea. It doesn't sound nice, but it's kind of true. And like sometimes I get phone calls from home being like, "Oh, the North Koreans have launched a missile. Like, are you okay?" And like everyone in South Korea just doesn't give a crap. Like it's just there's this level of disconnect, which I think, for outsiders might find quite surprising. But I do see kind of parallels in that level of disinterest.
Right, right. I mean, one of the talking points, definitely from a couple of years ago, I think definitely would want to mention is the Conor McGregor and the that tweet of "We are at war" and all that sort of stuff. That was obviously coming out quite a turbulent time in Ireland, maybe similar to what happened in the Southport riots in the UK. What exactly happened there, and is McGregor now going to be in politics? Because there's lots of stuff that I think that's probably the most Irish news I think the average Brit gets in the UK is it's probably McGregor is like I think a lot of where the headlines and news comes from. Um, so yeah, what exactly happened at that stage when he did that tweet and I think there was riots going on and then secondly, is that his now future in politics?
Well, just to give background on what exactly happened there was November 2023. Somebody went outside of school at about 2 p.m. in the day and seriously assaulted three small children and a care worker. One of the children, a 5-year-old girl, she is still in hospital. Like there was an update on her condition now, over a year later, that she apparently stood up, but she was seriously injured, to the point where that little girl will probably never be the little girl she was before this incident. Two other kids stabbed as well, and the care worker was seriously injured as well, but she survived, thank God. Um, Now, the person who was arrested is an Algerian man. There was a huge, like, just shitstorm, excuse my language, in the Irish media over the identification of that subject because while Grift was reporting, yeah, this man, he's Algerian, because he is, the others were like, no, 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 he's an Irish passport holder, he's Irish. And we were like, yeah, he's an Irish passport holder, like, but he's still from Algeria. Like my dad had an Irish passport, he was still Pakistani. Do you know what I mean? It's just this kind of huge kind of disingenuousness. And it's also like, why do you care? Like, why are you in the midst of this horrible tragedy? Why is your priority to try and say that the person who's suspected of doing it is Irish? Whatever. Okay, so the night after that happened, there was a protest called at 7 p.m. because the place that it happened is a school that is just a couple of minutes walk from O'Connell Street, which is our main thoroughfare. It's our big street where a lot of historical stuff has happened. So a protest was called. It's supposed to be a peaceful gathering. Now, I'm not aware of the timing of Conor McGregor's tweet on that occasion, but I believe it was on that day. Because in response to what had happened, he tweeted, "Ireland, we are at war," and it would seem to me that the reason he chose those words, or it may have been because, there were two very high profile murders. A teacher called Aisling Murphy was stabbed to death. She was stabbed 11 times in the neck by Slovakian, I think he may have been like Roma origin with Slovakian nationality, guy called Josef Pushka. So, 23-year-old girls going out jogging don't get stabbed to death in Ireland. Like that was just something that didn't really happen. And there was also very horrific targeted homophobic murders of two men in Sligo, where this Muslim Kurd, I think he was Iraqi or Kurdish, his family moved here through a refugee resettlement program, I believe. So he would have been here from the age of 4, but he deliberately targeted gay men and, he butchered them. Like, I'm not going to say exactly what he did to them, but he butchered them. And he also had a kill list that had at least 12 other names on it. And the only reason I think that we know that is because he actually attacked a third man called Anthony Burke, who he, I believe, stabbed in the eye with a screwdriver and left for dead. And because that guy, thank God, survived and was able to alert the police, that's essentially how he was stopped before he obviously killed two men, before they got him, but it seems like it could have been a lot worse. So in circumstances where there have been very brutal crimes committed by foreigners in a short space of time, then the suspect in this unprecedented crime. Like, come on, kids do not get stabbed on their way to school or coming out of school in Ireland. I don't think that's ever happened before. I'm pretty sure that has never happened before. And then that happens. It's like, I don't know, it was almost like a watershed moment to be like, God, what is wrong with our country? Then Conor McGregor does that tweet, not saying, I don't know what exact effect his tweet had on what happened afterwards. But the protest, more and more people came. Then the Gardaí, the police, they deployed the riot squad. I think that I think people were kind of rubbed up the wrong way by that. They were like, wait, so somebody's after stabbing these kids and this lady who was helping them. And your response is to deploy the riot squad against us who have done nothing, um, who are pissed off because, our country seems to be a little bit in flames here. And you have to also take into consideration that the political dialogue at that time was everyone who has anything negative or questioning or not fanfare to say about immigration is a racist and is far right. You know, there was even a member of parliament called Carol Nolan, who questioned the housing minister at the time, Dara O'Brien, as to, the practicalities of letting in unlimited numbers of Ukrainians. And he said that what she was saying was dangerous and that she was threatening social cohesion with her remarks. And these remarks, she was only commenting on the practicalities of housing limitless people. So that was like the stranglehold that the political and kind of media class had on people at that time who were critical of mass immigration and the potential negative aspects of it. So it was just like so many kind of high pressure things were happening all at once. And yeah, like the O'Connell Street was on fire. Like I was there. Actually, I think I'm one of the only journalists who was actually in the midst of the chaos. I had like bricks flying over my head, fireworks. I'd never seen anything like it. There were buses being set on fire, trams being set on fire. There were lads, putting boxes of rubbish inside police cars and setting them on fire. It was carnage, and after that there was a extended period of looting because there's a lot of shops on that street. And then, the government, the RTE, the national broadcaster, the next morning, I'll never forget it, had a news bulletin where they said that the rioters were far right agitators they were sponsored by far right agitators in the UK and USA. Now, I was there. I'm born and raised in Ireland. I know that they were young fellas from the inner city who couldn't name one politician for you, never mind being, part of some kind of far right organization. It's just a it's a ridiculous thing to say. And after that, not so long ago, actually, the Gardaí released photo fits of people who they want in connection with the looting. And lo and behold, a whole lot of them are not Irish. So integration is going really, really well when we have, foreign people coming in and joining the far right white nationalists.
Literally almost everything you just said there, I think so many of the UK people will relate to what happened 6, 7 months ago in Southport. It's almost not quite identical, but it's so similar. And in our case, it was Sir Keir Starmer gave that speech where he essentially said, even if you're worried about mass migration, you're essentially far right. It was almost identical to the what happened in Ireland. What happened after that? So the riots happened, being condemned by the state broadcaster. What happened as a response? Things just calmed down and the government just carried on, or did anything else happen?
There were rumors that they were going to try and prosecute Conor McGregor for incitement to violence. I think like this all happened when the government was also trying to bring forth a very controversial hate speech bill. Since then, I believe that they've dropped the speech elements of the bill. And our Minister for Justice, bit of a mess. Like she was saying that, we don't have incitement to hatred and all this. We don't have legislation for this. And it's like, yeah, we do actually. It was brought about in 1989 and it's still on the statute books. But, she was seemingly trying to, or maybe, I don't know, don't want to say what her motivation was. I don't know, but like it seemed as though that legislation was kind of purposely being ignored. That we do have hate crime legislation, like you're not allowed to incite violence against people in Ireland, and we also have assault. Very funnily enough, assault is illegal in Ireland. Like you're not allowed to punch someone in the face. And what they want to do with this hate crime legislation is they want to, for example, if you punch an Irish lad with like flaming red hair in the face, let's say you'll get a year in prison. But if you punch an African guy in the face, you might get 3 years in prison if it can be established that there was a hate motivation there. Okay, you probably didn't punch the ginger lad because you love him.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're basically trying to make a special category of victim in law where it's worse to commit a crime against a person who is like brown or black or gay than it is to just punch a white person, which that's ending equity before the law, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. And so, what's now happened with McGregor? We've seen stuff on in the UK that he is potentially going to be a politician, or he may run. I can't remember where I saw. Maybe he's going to be prime minister. What's his what's going on with him? There's also in the UK. I've seen lots of articles about him. Naturally, BBC saying that he belongs to far right groups and all this sort of stuff. So, what's going on with McGregor, and then just generally, is there actually a right wing or centre right party in Ireland that exists?
So McGregor, he one of the biggest things that's happened to him lately was that he was found culpable of raping a woman in 2018. So that was a pretty big case, went on for 2 weeks. I reported on it. So yeah, like it was a civil, interestingly, it was a civil rape case. I mean, a lot of people might not have heard of like, what's a civil rape case. But this woman, Nikita Hand, said that he raped her in a hotel in Dublin. And it was brought to the director of public prosecution. The director of public prosecution, sorry, said that there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. And then she appealed that decision. The DPP looked over it again. Again, there's not enough evidence to prosecute. No, she sent a letter with the help of the Rape Crisis Agency, basically saying that she believed that the director of public prosecution was not pushing ahead with the case because of who Conor McGregor is. Um, I'll leave it up to viewers to think about if they think that's a credible accusation or not. It's a big thing to say about the director of public prosecution. Um, so she then took a civil case, and then, in the civil courts, the stakes are lower in a way, isn't it? Because, you're not depriving a man of his liberty if he should be found guilty in the criminal court of rape. Rather, it's compensation, So in the end, she ended up winning against him. Like he's not been convicted of rape because the civil courts do not hand down convictions. But he was found culpable of rape in order to pay her, I think it's like 275,000 euros in compensation. And on the foot of that, he has had his drink whiskey brand, isn't it? His whiskey has been pulled from a lot of suppliers, So I think that his career in some ways, his product sponsorships or whatever you call them have kind of suffered in that way. But after that, he has been tweeting again about political ambitions. He was over for the inauguration of Donald Trump in DC, and during that time, some people were asking him, Conor, are you going to run for president of Ireland? And then he eventually said, yes, I will, which is something that he had said he would do before. So, I mean, he's tweeting about it. Like, how practical is that? Like, I'm probably not the best person to ask. Our president is. It's kind of a ceremonial role, to be honest. It doesn't carry the same weight as like the U.S. president, for example. So yeah, well, that's time will tell, I suppose.
And what about the general right wing situation in Ireland? Does that exist, like a centre right wing? Do you have the kind of parties in Ireland?
So I think that there are isolated pockets of resistance in that sense. There are some independent senators, it's mostly independents. There's independent senators like Senator Sharon Keoghan, who would be very outspoken on, gender issues like in immigration. There's like former Minister for Justice Michael McDowell, who's a senator. He was very strong on the no side of the referendums previously. There's a party called Aintu, which at the moment they only have two TDs, but they would be kind of like a pro-life party. Some people criticize them for not being strong enough on the immigration front. And there's also one called Independent Ireland, they would be more kind of center right. There's
Yeah.
that. But we don't have a reform. Like at the moment, like we don't have a vehicle that seems as though we can deliver change within 5 to 10 years. I think the UK is very, very much ahead of us in that sense.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
it's been great having a chat with you, Fatima. And I think if thinking of the future of Ireland, what do you think happens next? We've discussed a lot of what's going on now and some stuff that's gone on in the past, but what do you think, what would you see happening in the next few years if with Ireland?
I think that the issues that are facing us now are, you know, they're quite unprecedented. Like the immigration thing, the mass immigration thing is quite unprecedented. Like we haven't really had it in the UK for, for example, you had like people coming in the 60s, like a first wave and another wave. And like obviously people who've come there in the 60s are they're integrated, and they're like a lot of them will be proud to be British, and they're part of England, really, aren't they? Whereas we don't really have that. We just have this kind of huge tidal wave just now, and it's like, oh God, that's kind of where we are. So I think that in terms of the kind of political pushback we're seeing in the UK, I think Ireland needs another 10, maybe 5, 10 years to really kind of, figure out what the people want to do about it, if they want to do anything about it. I think I do see the far left rhetoric that was just completely adopted by the government and the mainstream media. I do see people moving away from that slowly. Like obviously the MAGA stuff is, grabbing a lot of attention. We're very sensitive to what happens in the United States because we have such an intertwined history of like, migration over to there, obviously the UK as well, but little bit a little bit of bad blood there that we probably don't have with the Americans. But yeah, I think that there probably is change coming. I don't know how fast it will be. I mean, Irish people have this tendency to kind of sit around and gripe and complain and not really get proactive and not really do anything about it. Like anyone who wants to see a change should probably get involved in politics or something. I don't know. But, I think change is coming. Like these kind of things are cyclical. So yeah, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Fingers crossed. Well, as a closing thing, we do think on this show where I asked the guest what's a unpopular opinion that you have that you think should be popular. So it can be something that we've discussed in the last hour or so, or it can be something completely different, trivial, completely up to you. So just an unpopular opinion that you have that you think should be popular.
I have so many unpopular opinions. I can't pick one. Ah, I don't know. Okay, well, I'll say something kind of. It sounds trivial, but it's actually my most viewed tweet ever. I got something like over 800,000 views. I think people should dress up when they go outside. And I don't mean they don't need to look like Jane Austen or something like that, but I'm really, really, really very disappointed by this trend of people going outside like constantly wearing sports clothes, just looking like they've rolled out of bed. I think that people should have pride in themselves and their appearance. And I think that, it's good for your mental health and it's good. Yeah, I just think people should take more pride in themselves. That's what I think.
I think that's a good, interesting opinion. We've not had something like that before in here, so I think that's an interesting one. I think it's all similar like when Jordan Peterson says "do your bed" and all that
Yep,
kind of rhetoric. It's a good
brush
way
your
to
hair.
start your day off. You've achieved, and you also feel like you've achieved something, and you go with
Mhm.
a good mentality. So I think that's a good one. But yeah, thank you for your time, Fatima. It's been amazing to chat to you,
Thank you. Lovely to speak to you.
and we'll hopefully do this again soon.